Over the years, we've had the chance to get some amazing Pokemon forms in various games that we just didn't get. So in this video, I'm going to go over some of these amazing forms and show you what they could have looked like. To start us off, a really good example of this sort of thing are Terastal Forms. While we did technically get one Terastal form with Terapagos, this was a non-existent thing otherwise, which was a bit disappointing since other gimmicks like Mega Evolution or Gigantamax have obviously produced new forms. It also could have produced some amazing new forms in its own right, and I believe that this Terastal form Absol shows that off quite well. I don't exactly have a reason why I decided to use Absol as an example here, it just kind of sounded like a cool Pokemon to do this with, but I think it does a good job of showing how good Terastal forms really could have been. The concept I came up with for this is that each Terastal form would not only look like normal terastallization and basically crystallize the Pokemon, but they would also evoke features of Terapagos as the source of terastallization, particularly with various diamonds and gemstones and its furry hair, which is why Absol gets a little bit fluffier and then naturally has diamonds and gems all over its body. I also thought that instead of the ridiculous type hats from normal terastallization, that each Terastal form could have certain gemstones on its body, like the one on Absol's head for instance, that would change color to match the type of the terastallized Absol, with the Absol still having the potential to terastallize into any of the types just like normal. Terapagos itself also gets a pretty good stat boost when it changes into its Terastal form, so I think that these Terastal forms could also gain a small boost as well. I don't imagine it would be as crazy as like Mega Evolution for instance, but maybe like a 50-point boost would be enough to give them a little help and help them to stand out a little more compared to normal terastallized Pokemon. As we move into this next form, a big shout out goes to Rgreywind for drawing all the artwork of these designs, and in particular this Absol because it honestly goes crazy, so be sure to check him out with the links in the description. With that said, I wanted to talk about Kantonian Forms next, and while this one is a little bit of a technicality, we definitely did have the chance to see some in Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee, especially with them also including things like the Alolan forms and Mega Evolutions. But those games obviously did not include something like that, so I wanted to go ahead and envision what that could have been like. And as Kantonian Wailord will show you, it could have been pretty wild. As you can see, this design is a bit more atypical than usual, but it has a lot going for it, so let's get into why it looks the way it does. First off, it's a water ghost type, and this is because it is based partly on a ghost ship. Wailord has some blimp elements to it, so I thought a ghost ship theme would be a lot of fun, and this is reflected in its fins now resembling the oars of a boat. This also overlaps with its other major theme, and that is of a dead whale. While that might sound a bit on the nose for a ghost type, it has to do with how whales are hunted in Japan. I'm not an expert on this by any means and kind of just skimmed over the subject for this design to be completely honest, but from what I understand, Japan has had a history of hunting whales even when they've been told not to. And with Kanto being one of the Japanese-based regions, that is where the idea for this form came about. As a part of this theme, Wailord's body is actually upside down in this design as well, to demonstrate that it is quote-unquote dead, with it also having a sort of false face up top to complement this. Finally, it also incorporates the Bake Kujira as well, a Japanese yokai that is described as a ghost whale skeleton who is said to take revenge against people who hunt whales, and is why you see a bit of a skeleton here in this design. So overall, I feel like all the inspirations do actually come together pretty well. And while it is a pretty unconventional design, I definitely think it would be cool to get to see Kantonian form Pokemon someday. And as we move into this next Pokemon, a big shout out goes to today's sponsor, Tokyo Treat and Sakura Co. for making this video possible. They bring you boxes of treats and snacks directly from Japan and bring them directly to your door and allow you to experience a plethora of yummy goodies that you'd never typically have the chance to otherwise. Whether it's special flavored Kit Kats, fun Pokemon themed snacks, or even authentic Japanese tea, these boxes come with some amazing stuff each and every time that you're gonna be sure to love. In fact, these month's boxes are special because they're themed around Tsukimi, which is a Japanese autumn moon festival, so there are lots of fall and bunny themed treats in here as well. In fact, the Sakura Co box is a monthly Japanese artisan snack box that even gives you an authentic piece of tableware each month, and this month it includes this gorgeous Tsukimi inspired cup. The best part, though, is that you can use my link in the description along with code HOOPS at checkout to get $5 off of your first box, which also directly supports the channel as well. So be sure to hit that link in the description to check that out, and thanks a ton to Tokyo Treat and Sakura Co. for sponsoring. When it comes to purported new forms that we never actually ended up seeing, a major one would have to be armored Pokemon. During the lead up to Pokemon Sword and Shield, a big rumor came out that said we would be getting armored evolutions, and Pokemon such as Charizard and Mewtwo would be getting armored forms. This rumor gained a lot of traction because along with this info, it also correctly predicted where the Galar region would be based before it was revealed, as well as the actual names of the games themselves. So it did actually seem legit for a little while, even though ultimately it obviously never ended up happening. If it did, though, it might have looked something like this. Since the rumor specifically mentions Mewtwo and Charizard, I decided to go ahead and give both of them armored forms to help visualize what this could have been like. And honestly, it would have actually fit into the games pretty well. In fact, the concept itself lines up quite well with Zacian and Zamazenta as the box art legendaries, as they actually do have what is essentially an armored form already, even though that's obviously not actually what it is. So thematically, it does make a lot of sense, and I imagine that the way Zacian and Zamazenta look would be a good barometer for how these forms could have appeared in general. Although I will say when it comes to Mewtwo in particular, there is no way that you could not give it the armor that it had in the first movie like I've done here, because that is just marketing and design perfection that everyone would have loved. So that's why I opted for that. Additionally, the way that I imagine these could have worked in battle is that in going along with the names of the games themselves and the whole idea of offense versus defense with Sword and Shield, I thought that each armored form could either be attack-oriented or defense-oriented, and depending on the Pokemon, it would get a huge boost to its attack or defense stats upon turning into these forms, and possibly even having them be maxed out entirely. So, for example, Charizard and Mewtwo would probably be attack-focused, so they would get their attack stats maximized, while a Pokemon like, let's say, Snorlax would have its defense maximized. I think that actually would have worked fairly well and made a lot of sense, and like I said, the idea actually does work pretty well with the game as a whole, so it's a pretty cool concept even though it never happened. While the idea of armored evolution was a pretty big deal at the time, a fan favorite concept that came around before that was even a thing was seasonal form Pokemon. We saw the introduction of seasons in Pokemon Black and White, and we even did get to see Deerling and Sawsbuck get their own seasonal forms as well. But to this point, these are the only Pokemon whose forms change with the seasons, and fans have long loved the idea of other Pokemon getting different forms during different seasons. So I have gone ahead and showcased an example of how that could look with seasonal form Scyther. I personally think this is a great example of how this concept could work, because a lot of times when you see it brought up, you simply see things like grass types gaining some fall-colored leaves, or maybe an ice type turns into a water type for the summer. And while those aren't bad ideas by any means, there are so many other ways that this could work past just the surface level stuff. And I feel like Scyther here is a great example of that. This form is a bug ghost type that Scyther would turn into during the winter. This is due to the fact that praying mantises, which Scyther is based on, typically do not survive the winter. Ergo, it's a perfect way to give Scyther a really cool new form that also works perfectly with the season's concept. Because of the ghostly vibes and the fact that Scyther has blades for hands, it's also loosely based on a Ronin as well, which is a samurai whose master has died, and therefore they have now become kind of like a drifter or a wanderer. Additionally, another thing that I think this design shows is that seasonal form Pokemon wouldn't just have to be fully evolved Pokemon who get the chance to have a new form. It could also be pre-evolved Pokemon as well, like Scyther, which I think would be great in terms of giving the chance to give pre-evolved Pokemon some love, because a lot of times these forms just focus on the fully evolved Pokemon. I also imagine that if winter came around and your Scyther ended up turning into this form, and you just loved it so much that you naturally wanted to keep it this way, new items could also be introduced along with this concept that the Pokemon could hold to keep them in this form outside of just that one season. So in Scyther's case, you could give it a winter orb to help it maintain this form year-round. But then, let's say if it was summertime and you're in battle with this Scyther, and this item gets knocked off Scyther in the battle, it would then revert to its regular form, which also would just add a ton of fun strategy and cool dynamics into battling when it came to these Pokemon with these forms. And I just think all the way around it's just such a fun and cool concept, and even though it didn't happen back in Gen 5, I do hope that someday they bring back the season's feature and introduce some new forms like this along with it. I would really like to know which of these forms you think is the most interesting though, so be sure to let me know all your thoughts in the comments, and like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Thanks so much for watching as always, I really appreciate it, and until the next one, as always, I will smell you guys later.